started the way most things end. Quietly. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind that doesn't ask anything of you. A little warm, a little gray. The kind of weather where nothing extraordinary should happen. I remember adjusting the passenger seat before I pulled out of the driveway. She liked it slightly reclined. Always said it made her feel less like a passenger and more like a traveler. It's funny, the details that stick. I was on my way to pick up Lindsay from the station. She had just wrapped up a 3-day retreat in the woods. Some women's wellness thing. Sound baths, group journaling, something about tapping into feminine alignment. I tuned most of it out when she described it the week before. She told me she needed space. Not in a threatening way, just in that new age tone she'd adopted recently. She said it like it was about her growth, like I should be proud of her for needing less of me. I tried not to take it personally. I was supportive, or I pretended to be. I dropped her off Friday morning and watched her walk away. Her back straighter than usual, her yoga mat slung confidently over one shoulder like a badge. She barely looked back. By the time I saw her again that Sunday, I had convinced myself that the awkwardness I'd felt lately was just me overthinking. That I was the one stuck in my head too much. That maybe she really did just need time to recharge. Space and time and alignment. All those buzzwords she'd started using lately. I told myself I was being dramatic. I pulled up to the curb outside the station just as the train was screeching to a halt. The door opened and there she was, Lindsay, stepping down like she belonged in a travel brochure. Windswept hair, oversized sweater that draped perfectly, and that same leather tote she always took on trips. The one she said made her feel like she had her life together. She smiled when she saw me. Wide, easy, practiced. It looked real enough. She slid into the passenger seat and sighed like she'd just come back from a war. Or a spa. God, she said, buckling her seatbelt. I missed real coffee. She leaned over, kissed me on the cheek. You wouldn't believe how intense the food detox was. I smiled and asked how it went. She launched into it, talking about full moon rituals, forest breathing exercises, a woman named Cypress who led everyone in a scream meditation. I nodded along, kept my eyes on the road. At one point she laughed, said something about a woman crying because a pine cone reminded her of her ex-husband. I chuckled. It was easy to pretend things were normal when someone's laughing. We stopped at a light near the house. She said she was exhausted, but in a good way. Said she felt cracked open, in touch with herself. I told her I was glad. I didn't say that her voice sounded different, or that her tone was just a little too smooth, like she'd practiced this summary of the weekend before I even pulled up. It was all too packaged. Still, I didn't question it. When we got home, she grabbed her tote and her water bottle but left her phone in the car. That wasn't unusual. Lindsay was always the type to carry too many things at once. She was already halfway up the front steps when I noticed the phone in the center console. Face up. It buzzed. Now, I swear to God, I wasn't trying to snoop. I wasn't digging. But the screen lit up and I looked down. Reflex. Human nature. And then I couldn't unsee it. There was a message notification. No name, just a heart emoji next to a photo. I froze. The photo showed a man. Tan, probably late 30s. Strong jaw, subtle smirk. He was standing shirtless in what looked like a cabin bedroom. Behind him, messy sheets. Dim lighting. The kind of place you go to unplug from your regular life. The kind of place that didn't look like a group retreat. Below the photo was a single caption. Just a little longer red heart. I stared at it. My first thought wasn't even anger. It was confusion. Shock has a way of silencing every other emotion. It just lands. It makes your body go still before your brain can catch up. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just kept looking at the screen like it would eventually explain itself if I stared long enough. She must have noticed I wasn't behind her, because she came back down the steps. When she saw me holding the phone, she didn't flinch. Didn't panic. Just smiled, cool as ever. Oh, that, she said, taking the phone from my hand with the kind of calm that made me nauseous. It's this thing we were doing at the retreat. Kind of a photo scavenger hunt. She laughed. Light. Dismissive. We had to pair off and send fake flirty pics to random numbers as part of a release exercise. Some sort of mirror work challenge. Totally harmless. She scrolled through her phone, flipped the screen around. See? There's mine. I sent this to Cyprus. It's supposed to help break down ego patterns or something. She laughed again, this time a little too hard. Honestly, it's so dumb. We were all a little high on cacao or whatever. Her voice was steady. Her hands didn't shake. Her smile didn't crack. I just nodded. I didn't say anything else. What could I say? The moment had already shifted, and if I pushed, it would mean I didn't trust her. That I was the insecure one. That I was the problem. And if there's one thing I've learned in the last few months, it's that Lindsay is a master of narrative. She knows how to make doubt look like disrespect, how to frame questions as accusations, how to make silence feel like the safer option. So I let it go, at least out loud. Inside, though, something cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, but it cracked and I felt it. Like the first hairline fracture in glass, it holds for a while, but it's already broken. You just don't know how long it'll take to shatter. She went inside and started unpacking like nothing happened. Said she was going to make tea and ground herself. I said I'd be in a minute. I sat in the car for a while, long enough for the silence to settle into something heavier. My hands were still on the steering wheel, even though the engine was off. I stared straight ahead, at the reflection of our house in the rearview mirror. Everything looked exactly the same, but it wasn't. That photo, that message, it didn't scream infidelity. It didn't come with confessions or lipstick-stained collars or lies you could easily prove. It was subtle, plausibly deniable, but it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like the beginning of something I hadn't been ready to face. The rest of that evening was a study in artificial normalcy. We ate dinner. She showed me a playlist from the retreat. She lit incense and talked about being in her body again. But the air between us had changed. It had gotten tighter, quieter, like a secret was sitting between us, taking up space. I didn't bring up the message again. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't ask why a grown man was sending her shirtless photos with love notes if it was all part of a harmless retreat game. I didn't ask because I already knew what the answers would sound like. And I couldn't bear to hear her lie that smoothly twice in one day. That night, as she curled up in bed beside me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to name what I was feeling. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even rage. It was the beginning of doubt. And once doubt walks in, it never walks out the same way. I didn't sleep that night. I laid there staring at the ceiling, trying to focus on the hum of the fan overhead, pretending it could drown out my thoughts. Lindsay fell asleep fast, like always. She curled onto her side, her back to me, breathing slow and even. I listened to the rhythm of it. Steady, peaceful, unbothered. Meanwhile, my mind was racing. That message, just a little longer red heart, looped in my head like a chorus I didn't ask for. No matter how I tried to rationalize it, it clung to me. I could still see the photo when I closed my eyes. That look on his face. That half-smile. Like he knew something I didn't. Like he belonged to a story I wasn't invited into. I told myself I wasn't going to jump to conclusions, that maybe it really was some group challenge or inside joke. But even as I thought it, I didn't believe it. And the worst part? She knew I didn't believe it either. She saw it on my face. And instead of offering something real, she handed me a script she'd clearly rehearsed. That was when my brain started digging, uninvited. All the little moments I had dismissed before suddenly clicked together like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too tired, or too trusting, to solve. The new passcode on her phone a few months back. Just part of a mindfulness habit, she'd said. It helps me stay off it more. The way she started wearing perfume again, one I didn't recognize. She'd stopped wearing any for over a year, said the scents made her nauseous. But now, every time she came home from one of her solo wellness walks, there was something floral lingering in the air behind her. Her clothes, too. She used to live in oversized tees and yoga pants, especially on the weekends. But recently, she'd started wearing things she used to save for nights out. Fitted tops, low backs, flowy skirts with slits that danced around her legs. She called it part of her feminine rebirth. Said she was reclaiming her sensuality. At the time, I thought maybe it was just about confidence. I encouraged it. I didn't see what was really happening. Or maybe I saw it and chose not to. That's the part that hits hardest now. It's not just the betrayal itself. It's that I made it easy. The affection started disappearing little by little. No more spontaneous hugs in the kitchen. No more lazy weekend mornings where we'd stay in bed too long, talking about nothing. No more "I saw this and thought of you" texts. Instead, there were hours of silence, sudden sighs, and new phrases. Ones that didn't sound like her. She started saying things like, "I need to protect my peace," when I asked why she was being distant. It was like she'd subscribed to a breakup guide and started reading the lines aloud. We used to cook dinner together every night, or at least sit down to eat at the same time. Now she'd already eaten by the time I got home. Or she wasn't hungry. Or she was fasting. Or she had an online workshop to attend and didn't want to be disturbed. I started eating alone more often than not, pushing food around my plate in a quiet house that used to hum with life. She used to read in the evenings, curled up on the couch wearing my old hoodie. I can still picture her, legs tucked under, dog-eared book in hand, laughing softly at whatever she was reading. That hoodie sat untouched in the closet now, replaced by silky robes and elaborate loungewear that looked more staged than lived in. And then there were the nights she started staying out late. First for yoga classes, then sound baths, then integration circles. At first, I didn't question it. I told myself it was good that she was finding community, that maybe she was finally breaking out of the rut we'd both silently slipped into. But then she stopped telling me when she'd be back at all. She'd slip in late, always with a soft smile and vague answers. "It was powerful," she'd say. Or, "It went longer than planned. We were processing." I'd ask questions, and she'd answer with silence or one-word deflections. She started describing everything in energy terms. "I don't want to be interrogated," she said once when I asked who was driving her home. "You're making this feel unsafe." That was the moment I stopped asking questions. Because once someone starts making you feel like the villain for noticing the shift in their love, the game is already lost. She changed the way she looked at me, too. Not obviously, but there was a difference. Before, her eyes used to search mine, like she was reading something only she could see. Now they just skimmed across my face, like I was a page she'd already read too many times. I used to feel like home to her. Now I felt like background noise. One night, I remember sitting on the couch while she walked past me, talking to someone on speakerphone. Her voice was light, animated. She was laughing. I assumed it was one of her friends, until she lowered her voice and said, "No, don't say that. You'll get me in trouble." Trouble. That word stuck with me like a splinter, not because of what it was, but because of how familiar she sounded saying it. That's when it hit me. I hadn't heard her laugh like that with me in months. After she hung up, I asked who it was. She blinked, like she hadn't expected me to notice. "Just someone from the retreat group," she said. "They were helping me work through a dream I had." "Right, a dream." I nodded. Later, while she showered, I picked up her phone. I didn't open it, I couldn't. That would have crossed a line I wasn't ready to admit I'd even considered. But I held it in my hand, looked at the background, some new landscape photo of a beach I didn't recognize, and realized I had no idea who she was texting anymore, or who was texting her. The more I replayed the last few months, the more I realized it wasn't one moment that broke us. It wasn't a single lie, or the photo, or even the fading affection. It was the hundreds of micro-moments I had brushed aside, the excuses I had accepted, the things I told myself were probably fine, the parts of her I watched quietly drift away, thinking she'd come back on her own. She never did. And now here I was, lying awake in a dark room, next to a woman I still loved, and wondering when exactly she stopped loving me back. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe it was instant. Maybe it was never love at all and just convenience that dressed up nicely for a few years. Whatever it was gone. And the worst part? I noticed too late. I didn't plan to come home early that day. In fact, I'd been dragging my feet at work just to avoid being in the house. The space between Lindsay and me had become too loud lately, filled with the kind of silence that presses on your ears. Even when we were in the same room, I felt like I was eavesdropping on a life I no longer belonged to. That afternoon, around 3 p.m., a last-minute client meeting got pushed. I could have stayed at the office or gone for a drive. But something instinct maybe told me to go home. The neighborhood was quiet when I pulled up. Our street always was. But something felt off the second I stepped onto the porch. The front door was locked. Not unusual, maybe, but during the day, Lindsay never locked it. She liked it open, said it made the house feel breathable. That's the word she used, breathable. She claimed locked doors disrupted energy flow. But today that door was shut tight. I stood there for a second, key in hand, just listening. Nothing. No music, no podcast, no incense burning from the entry table. Just stillness. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and immediately caught the scent. Faint, but unmistakable. Cologne. Not mine. It hit me like a memory I didn't want. Sharp, intrusive. It wasn't the earthy sandalwood she burned in her diffuser, or the lavender spray she misted over the couch. This was heavier, masculine, the kind of scent that didn't belong in our house, at least not anymore. I didn't call out. I didn't even take my shoes off. I just stood in the hallway listening. Then I saw it. A jacket, thrown carelessly across the bottom steps of the staircase. A man's jacket. Navy. Slim cut. One I had never seen before. My stomach dropped. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted this to be a mistake. Maybe someone had stopped by. Maybe it was a delivery guy who came inside to use the bathroom. Maybe, I don't know, anything but what it clearly was. Voices drifted from upstairs. Low, conversational. One was hers. The other, a man's, soft, relaxed, familiar. Too casual. Like this wasn't their first conversation in my house. I moved slowly up the stairs, each step feeling like a betrayal of its own. I didn't want to hear what was being said. I didn't want confirmation, but I couldn't stop, because part of me already knew, had known. This was just the final piece. The voices were coming from the bathroom, door mostly closed, but not locked. They were laughing, not hysterically, just comfortably, the way you laugh with someone who knows you, the kind of laughter I hadn't heard from her in a long time. I stepped closer, heart pounding. I didn't barge in. I didn't yell. I didn't even open the door. I just stood there long enough to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was the outsider in my own home. Then the door opened. They both froze. She stepped out first, robe tied neatly at the waist, wet hair slicked back. No guilt on her face. No panic. Just a small, neutral smile like I'd walked in on her brewing tea. Behind her stood the man. Early 30s, maybe. Trim beard, linen pants. One of those wrap shirts people wear when they've convinced themselves they've transcended capitalism, but still charge $200 an hour for breath work. He looked at me and gave a small nod, like we were at some weird retreat and he was the keynote speaker. Lindsay didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't explain. "This is Kale," she said, like that meant something. "He's a wellness coach. We were doing a session. In our bathroom, while she wore a robe and he smelled like he'd just walked out of a cologne ad." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth was already sitting there between us, legs crossed, smiling serenely. She stepped past me, heading toward the bedroom. "We were wrapping up," she said over her shoulder, as if that cleared it up. Kale looked at me, unsure whether to offer a handshake or just drift away like sage smoke. I turned and walked back downstairs without looking at him. When I got to the kitchen, I stood at the counter, palms pressed against the marble. My chest was tight, but my mind was strangely quiet. No yelling in my head. Just a simple, steady fact. This was it. Not the beginning of the end. Not a misunderstanding. This was the thing itself. The part where the story changes. The point where trust doesn't just bend, it snaps. A few minutes later, I heard the front door open and close. No dramatic exit. No slammed door. Just a quiet retreat. He was gone. Lindsay came downstairs a few minutes after. She didn't say anything. Just walked into the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and drank slowly. I looked at her and waited for the apology, the explanation, the excuse. But none came. Instead, she looked up at me and said, "You're upset." Not a question. A statement. I nodded. "Yeah." She set her glass down. "You're reading into things." I laughed. Couldn't help it. Was he reading into things too? Her expression didn't change. She didn't flinch. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." She sighed like she was tired of having to carry my confusion. "Kale helps me regulate my nervous system. He's trained in somatic healing." "That's what you walked in on." "In our bathroom?" She tilted her head. "It's a safe space for me." I stared at her, at the woman I used to know. I didn't even recognize this version of her. "There's nothing to explain," she said finally. "Unless you want to create drama where there is none." "Drama, right?" I nodded. "Got it." And I walked out of the room, because there was no argument that needed to be had. No confrontation that would give me clarity. The truth had already spoken. It came in the scent of another man, the sound of laughter behind a door, and the look on her face when she realized I knew, and didn't care that I knew. Some things don't need proof. They just need presence. And I had been present. Fully. Painfully. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed. Our bed. The sheets were still unmade. Her pillow dented the way it always was after a nap. I looked at the nightstand, where she kept her crystal charging bowl and a book called The Wisdom of Leaving. I'd never bothered to read The Spine before. Felt appropriate now. I didn't sleep in that bed that night. Couldn't. Instead, I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling again. This time, I didn't search for answers. I just existed in the knowing. There was no more space for benefit of the doubt. No more excuses I could stomach. Whatever this was, whatever she had been turning it into, it wasn't mine anymore. And I didn't want it back. I didn't leave the next morning in a storm. No slammed doors. No shouted ultimatums. No dramatic declarations that would echo through the walls after I was gone. I just woke up early. Earlier than usual. The sky was still dark. That bluish pre-dawn shade that makes the world feel quieter than it is. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, just listening to the hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock, and the occasional creak of a house that no longer felt like mine. She was still asleep upstairs. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black, out of habit, and took it to the front steps. It was cold. I hadn't thought to grab a jacket. I didn't feel it. Everything in me felt numb, like I'd stepped out of my own body and left the version of me who cared behind. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to go. When I got into my car and backed out of the driveway, I looked at the house through the rearview mirror. It looked peaceful, normal, as if nothing had happened. But inside, the dynamic had shifted so drastically that the foundation might as well have cracked. And it had. By that night, I was back. Later than I said I would be, not that she'd asked. Lindsay had texted around 2 p.m. to say she'd be doing some energy work in the backyard and might not be available. I never replied. Didn't feel the need to. When I walked through the door, I half expected to find her mid-ritual, burning sage, drawing symbols, muttering affirmations into the soil. But she was just sitting at the kitchen table. Legs crossed. Calm. Still. Like she'd been waiting. She smiled when I entered. Not warm. Not apologetic. Just neutral. "How was your day?" she asked, like it was normal again. I nodded. "Fine." She stood, walked to the stove and stirred a pot. "I made lentil stew." I didn't answer. She kept talking, something about the new moon, or how Kale had suggested a juice cleanse to help release stagnant emotions. Her voice was light, controlled, pleasant. It was like watching someone play a role they'd long since rehearsed. If she was hoping for a return to routine, she didn't understand how far we were from it. I sat at the table and listened as she served herself a bowl. She didn't make one for me, didn't ask if I wanted any. I guess she knew I wouldn't eat it. I wasn't hungry, not for food, not for comfort, not for her. After dinner, she moved to the couch and picked up a book. I didn't join her. I used to. We'd curl up together and read or put on a movie, always touching, even if it was just our legs brushing. That night, I stayed in the hallway, scrolling my phone with a detachment I hadn't known I was capable of. She didn't say goodnight when she went to bed. I didn't follow. That was how it started, my slow vanishing. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't beg her to explain. I just receded, like water pulling back from a shore it no longer wanted to touch. I stopped doing little things first. I used to bring her coffee every morning the way she liked it, black with a splash of almond milk, no sugar. She said sugar clouded her intuition. That stopped. Then I stopped reminding her of things, appointments, bills, packages that needed to be picked up. That was always my job, keeping the ship afloat. But if the ship was sinking, why keep it patched? She didn't seem to notice at first. Or maybe she did, and this was what she wanted. That was the thing, when someone spends enough time convincing you that they need space, you eventually give it to them. And when you do, they realize that space is a lot colder than they thought. By the end of the week, I had mentally moved out, even if I was still technically living there. She floated through the days like she was starring in a commercial for wellness influencers. There were fresh flowers on the table, candles burning in every room. She played ambient music on a loop and started sending out newsletters from her new website, Reclaiming Radiance. She never showed them to me, but I saw the titles in her email preview once. Things like 5 Ways to Step into Your Feminine Knowing and Clearing the Clutter of Old Partnerships. Old partnerships. That was how she saw it. A chapter closing before I'd even realized we were near the end. I didn't argue. I just started disappearing more practically. I worked longer hours, took side projects I didn't care about. I stopped suggesting date nights or asking if she wanted to watch a show. I even stopped texting during the day. The less I gave, the more she seemed to thrive at first. She went to yoga more often, went out with her spiritual sisters, posted filtered selfies with captions about healing, self-love, boundaries. For a while, it looked like she was exactly where she wanted to be. But then came the subtle unraveling. The first time I noticed, it was the cat. I came home late one evening and found our cat, Beans, curled up next to an empty food bowl, crying softly. His water was gone. Litter box a mess. Lindsay used to dote on him like he was a child. Now she hadn't even noticed he hadn't eaten all day. I fed him, cleaned up, said nothing. The second time it was the kitchen light. It had been flickering for weeks. I used to fix those things immediately. That day, I just stared at it for a while and then left the room. Stayed broken. So did we. The fridge started emptying too. Not that either of us was eating much. She bought juice, herbs, exotic mushrooms I didn't know how to pronounce. But no real food, no staples, no shared meals, just separate existences. One morning, I realized she hadn't said my name in over a week. Not once. And I hadn't said hers either. There were logistical conversations. Did you pay the gas bill? I'll be gone this weekend. But nothing with weight. Nothing that meant anything. We had become polite strangers, crossing paths in a house that echoed with the absence of everything we used to be. Music stopped playing, too. She used to blast playlists while cooking, while working, while getting ready. Now the house was quiet, still, as if the air had thickened and was choking out the frequency. I started sleeping on the couch full-time. At first I rotated nights, said I was falling asleep watching something. But eventually I just stayed there. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask at all. I think it dawned on her slowly what she'd lost. Not because of something I said or did, but because of what I stopped doing. It's a strange thing, watching someone realize the cost of the freedom they demanded. First, she looked relieved, then neutral, then hollow, like the house she worked so hard to spiritually cleanse had turned against her. I'd catch her sitting alone on the couch, staring out the window, chewing her thumbnail, a habit she'd broken years ago. She started wearing my hoodie again, not in the affectionate way she used to, but in a quiet, desperate way. Like putting it on might summon something back. But it didn't, because you can't wear a ghost and expect it to stay. She tried a few things. One night, she cooked my favorite meal, pasta with her homemade sauce. Lit candles. Wore the dress she'd worn on our 3rd anniversary. I came home, sat across from her, and ate in silence. Didn't compliment the food. Didn't ask about her day. She made tea. I washed the dishes. We never spoke. Another night, I found a note on my pillow. It said, "I miss us. Do you?" I didn't write back. Not because I was cruel, but because I didn't. Not anymore. She started slipping. Just slightly. The energy around her began to dim. Her voice lost that performative warmth. Her eyes stopped glowing. She'd stare at me when she thought I wasn't looking. Quiet, calculating. Like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't come with a key. But I wasn't a puzzle. I was gone. It didn't fall apart all at once. It's never like that. Not really. It's one cracked plate left in the sink too long. One unanswered text. One glance that lasts a little too long in silence before someone turns away. That's how things end, quietly, piece by piece. Until there's nothing left worth breaking. By the time the silence between Lindsay and me solidified into something permanent, the damage had already been done. But what neither of us expected, what she didn't see coming, was how deeply her autonomy would echo once it had no one to bounce off of. For weeks, I had become a background hum in her life. Something always there, never acknowledged. She had her independence, her rituals, her new path. I gave her exactly what she said she needed. Space. And for a while, she basked in it like someone stretching out after shedding a tight skin. She held morning ceremonies in the backyard. Burned dried flowers tied with twine. Recorded voice memos filled with affirmations. I'd hear her repeating things into her phone. I am blooming in my own season. My joy is not dependent on others. I am not responsible for another's perception of me. She sounded proud when she said it. Like a coach reciting a victory speech. She wore silk robes and posted filtered photos of herself in the golden hour light. Started signing her emails with love and light, L. She held online workshops about boundary setting, soft power, self-reclamation. She even had a ring light delivered, a huge one, industrial. Said it was for her branding. It was almost impressive. She curated her freedom like an art gallery, everything posed just right. She finally had a life unburdened by compromise, and for a while she made it look effortless. But freedom without connection is a slow, quiet erosion. And it wasn't long before the first signs of wear began to show. The cat was the first thread to fray. Beans, our gray tabby with too much personality for his own good, used to follow her around the house like a shadow. He'd sleep curled beside her laptop, meow when she left the room, paw at the bathroom door like a toddler. Then, one evening, I came home to find him crying near his food bowl again. Empty. His water, too. I checked the litter box. Overflowing. Crystals piled in the corner like small drifts of snow. I scooped, filled the bowl, stroked his head. He purred, but even that sounded weak. I didn't say anything to Lindsay. I didn't need to. The kitchen was quiet when I fed him. No candles. No music. Just a muted hum from the refrigerator and the soft sound of water filling his dish. The next day, I heard her on the phone in the living room, saying something about how taking care of others shouldn't come at the expense of the self. Beans curled next to me on the couch while she spoke, blinking slowly. He didn't even look up. Then came the light. The kitchen bulb had been flickering for days, sometimes buzzing. I stopped noticing. That is, until I walked in one night and found Lindsay standing beneath it, staring up at the ceiling like it had insulted her. "You know it's been doing that for a week, right?" she said. I shrugged. Thought maybe it was intentional. Retro lighting for a moody kitchen. She didn't laugh. She asked if I could fix it. I said I didn't have time. She didn't ask again. The next night, I heard her dragging a chair across the floor. 30 minutes later, the light was off. Not fixed, just removed. She'd unscrewed the bulb and left it on the counter like a surrender flag. For days, we ate dinner in the dark, the two of us sitting across from each other like ghosts, barely casting shadows. The fridge followed, started humming louder than usual, then not at all. By the time I opened it to find the spinach frozen and the oat milk warm, it was clear something was wrong. I closed the door and left it. So did she. For days, she didn't say a word about it. She just ordered takeout, always for one. I never heard her ask if I wanted anything. Sometimes she made smoothies and drank them standing at the sink, eyes glazed over like she was somewhere else. It became a pattern. The house didn't break suddenly. It dissolved slowly, like sugar in cold tea. Dishes were left in the sink longer. Laundry stayed folded in baskets instead of drawers. Dust settled in corners. We were two people living among things, not within them. I don't think she noticed right away. She was busy with her projects. She set up a corner of the spare room as a recording space. Hung tapestries, arranged crystals, stacked books with titles like Sacred Womanhood and The Alchemy of Self. I caught glimpses of her talking into her phone, her voice airy and authoritative. Sometimes, we think we miss a person, but what we really miss is the version of ourselves that existed with them. The first time I heard her say that, I stood in the hallway, just out of sight. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. Like she was trying to convince herself more than her audience. But then the power flickered one night while she was mid-recording. She let out a loud sigh from the other room and didn't even try to hide the frustration. "What now?" she muttered. I didn't go in. She didn't ask for help. Instead, I heard her slam her laptop shut, shuffle around, and retreat upstairs. That was the start of the cracks. The curated independence began to show its gaps. The bills stopped getting paid on time. Not the big ones, but the little ones. Subscriptions, storage, a missed credit card statement that ended up on the kitchen counter with a red stamp. I saw it. I left it. She'd always joked that I was the functional half of our dynamic. That she brought energy and intuition, and I brought systems and spreadsheets. At the time, it felt playful. Now it just felt accurate. The days blurred. She grew quieter. Not in the intentional, meditative way she used to talk about, but in a distracted, unsettled way. I'd pass her in the hall and see her eyes dart from her phone to the floor, like she was watching something fall apart that she didn't know how to catch. She stopped journaling, stopped lighting incense, stopped playing music altogether. And when she did play something, it was always the same soft instrumental playlist, looping so faintly I sometimes wondered if it was just in my head. At night, she started coming downstairs again, not to talk, not to reconnect, just to sit. Sometimes she'd stand in the kitchen for 20 minutes without doing anything. Other times, she'd open the fridge, stare inside, and then close it without taking anything out. She was beginning to feel the weight of the life she'd claimed she wanted. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. It was in the way she moved, slower, more hesitant. In the way she lingered in rooms longer than necessary, like maybe if she stood there long enough I'd acknowledge her. I didn't. Not out of malice. Out of mercy. She had asked for freedom. I had given it. What she didn't understand, what she couldn't have known, is that the absence of someone's presence is sometimes louder than their attention. She had believed her life would feel more vibrant without me tethered to it. Instead, it felt incomplete. She didn't reach for me. Not directly, but I noticed her trying. She started leaving her tea on the table longer, knowing I used to always bring it to her once it cooled. She wore the sweatshirt I hadn't seen her touch in a year, the one with the bleach stain and the fraying cuffs. She started wearing my cologne. Not a lot, just enough. And then came the messages, printed ones, on sticky notes, tucked into random places, my dresser drawer, the car dashboard, the fridge handle. I miss the way we used to laugh. Still think about the night we danced in the kitchen. I'm sorry I made you feel replaceable. I never responded. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I had already felt everything. And now I felt nothing.